Greetings, fellow RotoBallers. Welcome back. It is the Checkdown. It is Week 15, but it is also Week 1 of your fantasy playoffs. My name is Joey Christopoulos. My co-host, Dave Rispoli. What's up, Dave?
Joey, I just want people to know, normally I'd be wearing a very loud shirt because we had very good picks last week, but I'm wearing all black because it's the playoffs. It's time to get serious, Joe.
You're ready for a funeral at any moment, but let's see if we can find out some picks that maybe help out some fantasy rosters this week that are finally in the playoffs. Dave, who is your first QB start of the week for Week 15?
It's going to be Jalen Hurts, Joey, versus Washington. This is a guy who a couple of weeks ago would have been an absolute smash must start. Then he had a little bit of a rocky start, and then he got injured, and then they were on a bye. So I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting about him. The sheen to him is kind of gone. But coming off of a bye, hoping that he's fully healed. I'll put that out there. Let's timestamp this thing. It is Tuesday. We're recording this. But they're about to take on the worst pass defense, who might be rolling out a really banged up Heineke or even a Kyle Allen. So now I don't foresee a ton of pass yards in Jalen Hurts' future because, you know, he won't have to put up that many points because this is not going to be a shootout. But I think this sets up very nicely for Hurts to be able to pass and run at will.
It's the classic fantasy case of, is he a good quarterback in real life? He's a very good fantasy quarterback, and he's got a really good matchup. I love that call a whole lot. Moving on, my second quarterback start for Week 15. I'm going with Kirk Cousins versus our Chicago Bears.
Welcome back, pal.
Yeah. Well, Adam Thielen is hurt. I also like Justin Jefferson a whole lot in this matchup. But let's just look at Kirk Cousins. You know, the Chicago defense is banged up. It's injured on the second half of their secondary. Not a very good alignment of players, and they're losing them more by the day. They're allowing the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, 10 total touchdowns over their last 3 games. They've allowed 23 fantasy points or more to 5 of their last 7 quarterbacks. And Cousins is averaging 19.5 fantasy points over his last 6 played. That includes 13 touchdowns with multiple touchdowns in every single game. Dave, I think this is a solid start. And for those of you that have been riding Kirk Cousins all week long, I think he's a start and a good play in your first fantasy week of the season.
Yeah. Now, if you're feeling not so confident, or maybe you've had to stream all year, maybe you have Lamar Jackson, maybe you have Josh Allen, maybe they're questionable right now. You don't know if they're going to play. Well, we want to give you one streamer.
Mitch Trubisky. No,
oh, he actually might end up starting in some people's leagues. God help them, Joey, but it's not him. We're going to say Tua.
Yes.
Tua, multiple passing tutties in 2 of his last 3 games. Coming off a bye, he now finally has a healthy Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle to throw to. They may also, Joey, be starting one Duke Johnson at running back because their entire running back room as of now has COVID. We don't know how that's going to shake out, but my guess is they could be leaning a little bit more on the pass than usual. What say you, Joe?
I think they're going to be leaning on that left shoulder. And you look at this Jets matchup, and you look at it overall from the broad perspective of the entire season, it's not that great. They're only allowing 16.2 fantasy points to quarterbacks all season long. But over the last 10 games, the Jets allowing 20.98 fantasy points a game to quarterbacks. That's 20 touchdowns in that span, a multiple touchdown game for every single quarterback that they face over the last 10. So we like that for Tua as well. And Dave, I'm just going to throw it out there a little bit. We were banging on our Bears. Justin Fields, just saying, you've got a lot of injuries, a lot of decisions. I'm not so sure about this week, but just keep in mind the last 3 games that Justin Fields has finished 21.93 fantasy points a game, and he gets Minnesota twice, the Giants, and Seattle over this last 4-game stretch, which means actually really vulnerable, really decent, beatable matchups for Justin Fields. I think he needs to be rostered. If you're a Lamar Jackson owner, you know, if you're going to go out there, you're going to go pick up somebody else. You know, hopefully you are starting a guy like Tua. I mean, maybe picking up Justin Fields too as well as extra insurance wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. Dave, it's time to move on to our tight ends. Tight end starts in Week 15. This is where you butter your bread. This is where you win your fantasy championships right here. So give us a tight end start for Week 15.
Well, I'm going to piggyback off to it. I'm going to say one of his favorite targets, Mike Gesicki, taking on the New York Jets because, hey, Mike Gesicki, as of now, he's still the tight end 8 on the season. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better option, especially taking on the Jets, who are giving up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. And look, last time we saw this guy, he got 11 targets, Joe. Now, I'm not expecting that, but you're telling me 4 or 5 catches, 60 yards, and a tutty? Love it. Sign me up.
Gesicki is the targets king here on the check down, and we're hoping that he can help us out one more time. My next tight end start, Dave. Let's go back to our QB starts. Let's keep pairing them up a little bit because I'm going Dallas Goedert versus the Washington football team. Dallas Goedert, fun stat, he's the 6th best tight end in fantasy this year. He's averaging 7.1 points. That's basically where the tight end position is like. Look, our buddy Diamond Dallas, he's coming off a bye week right now. In week 13, he blew up for 6 catches for 105 yards and 2 tutties. We're not saying he's going to do exactly that, but he has 60-plus receiving yards in 4 of his last 7 games, 5.28 targets a game in that span. And that includes a goose egg, too, as well in week 12 against the New York Giants. So those numbers would be a little bit higher. Look, I just kind of really like this matchup. They have 17th fewest fantasy points to tight ends for the Washington football team, but they've allowed 3 touchdowns to tight ends over their last 7 games. I just think this is a quality matchup. There's going to be some targets out there. I think he can find his way into the end zone. I'm going for it. I feel it. I'm calling it a start. Goddard in week 15. Dave, let's move over to our QB sits. Who do you not like? Who are you scared about? Who may disappoint in week 15 from the quarterback position?
Well, Joey, let me warm up and get ready for the comments. Let me just get all right, here we go. I'm saying
the dots are forming.
Joe Burrow versus the 49ers. Here's why. Look, I know he just totally lit it up for you last week, folks. But that was a product of the 49ers' extremely weak secondary and their desire to constantly leave Jamar Chase in one-on-one situations. This week, very different story, taking on Denver. Top 5 versus the pass. Broncos, here's the thing. They have 8 interceptions in their last 6 games. Burrow.
Who's leading the league in interceptions, Dave?
Burrow has thrown 9 picks in his last 11 games. So look, the Bengals O-line also could absolutely get devoured by this Denver front. I think Joe Burrow is not going to have the time he did against the 49ers to throw it. I'm just saying, in a do or die week in your playoffs, I think he's a little bit risky. I can think of 13, 14 other quarterbacks I'd rather start over him. Now, if you're caught in a position where you're saying, well, you guys said Justin Fields and you said sit Joe Burrow, then maybe that's the situation where I would start Joe Burrow over someone like that. But I'm just saying, if you've been like rolling with 2 quarterbacks, like in one league, I have Russell Wilson and Joe Burrow, definitely starting Russ Wilson over a Joe Burrow.
Yeah, we're just saying maybe temper your expectation. He could disappoint. Those interceptions scare us a little bit. Another guy who's actually a top 12 quarterback in fantasy this year, you know, he's a bit of a streamer stay away, and maybe people have been riding for a little bit, is Carson Wentz versus the New England Patriots. This is a Patriots matchup problem that I just don't like for Carson Wentz. Patriots allowing 13.97 fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. Dave, 4 straight games of holding the quarterback position under 10 fantasy points. 5 of 6 games allowing 10 points or less, and they haven't allowed a 200-yard passing game since week 8. And on top of that, oh yeah, Carson Wentz, he's playing with a guy named Jonathan Taylor, right? And you see this Colts success, and they're running up the score, and then you're checking out Carson Wentz, and you're going, wait a second, where are the fantasy points for Carson Wentz? They're all going to Jonathan Taylor because Carson Wentz has posted 11 or fewer fantasy points 3 times over his last 4 weeks and 180 passing yards or less in that span. Look, I just don't, the Colts are on the move right now. They got momentum. I just think, I don't think it's Carson Wentz that gets it done, especially against the Patriots.
Joey, you're never going to believe this. This is breaking news. This is leaked. I actually have the Colts game plan for this upcoming Saturday. It says play 1 through 25, run it with Jonathan Taylor. And then it's blank after that. So it's crazy, man. Just run it with, just copy and paste it. Run it with Jonathan Taylor. Run it with Jonathan Taylor. What should we do next?
Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Yeah.
Run it with Jonathan Taylor. Yeah.
There's a Mo Alley Cox, and it's just scribbled out, and then a Jonathan Taylor written over the top of it.
I'm going to give you my tight end sit of the week. Speaking of copy and pasting, Joey, let's just go ahead and copy and paste everything I said last week because it still stands with Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts. Joey, it turns out we were right about him, okay? It's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride for us on the Kyle Pitts train, but one of our best offseason calls was this guy was a 4th-round bust. Too pricey, and it turned out to be true. There were some middle weeks where it was like, oh, we were sweating a little bit, but things have evened out. Why? Defenses have learned he's their best weapon. They're double-teaming him, triple-teaming him even. He is still continuing to disappoint you. But you say, wait a minute. He had his best game since week 9. He had 61 receiving yards. And then you look back to week 9 where he had, checks notes, 62 receiving yards. Ah, yes.
Throw a parade.
That's where we're at with Kyle Pitts. No touchdowns. This guy is allergic to the end zone. This is a stat I read last week, and then I double checked to make sure he got any targets in this last game. He did not, so this stat still holds, Joey. He has just 4 end zone targets all year.
Wow.
And in his last 6 games, he has 0 end zone targets, not red zone, end zone targets. So when they're on the 5, Matt Ryan, for some reason, not looking at him, most likely because he's getting double and triple teamed.
Man, that is a crazy stat. That is criminal, and I can't wait to draft Kyle Pitts next year when Matt Ryan hopefully is not the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, just to hammer that home, averaging 4.27 fantasy points his last 7 games, Dave. It's just not happening, guys.
Can't do it. Can't
the
do
name recognition just can't do it. Got to find us go somewhere else. Another sit for me is another name recognition guy. Look again, timestamp, Tuesday afternoon, Pacific time. Had a hand injury, didn't play last week. T.J. Hawkinson versus the Arizona Cardinals. Look, even if he does suit up, I don't really like the matchup a lot. The Lions, they're so decimated that you think maybe they'll just truck him out there just to get him out here. Well, I just don't really like it because the Arizona Cardinals allow the third fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends this year. Jimmy Graham with 1 catch for 1 yard with 1 touchdown, 8.6 is the most fantasy points outside of George Kittle that have been posted against them in a very long time. And look, Hawkinson only 3.25 targets over his last 4 games played, and his 6 games of 5 points or fewer. He has been boom or bust on a terrible offense. Look, you picked him up because you're hoping that he's going to be a guy. He's still a top 10 tight end, but I mean he's just kind of really fallen off the map. You got to go try and look for something else somewhere else.
Yeah, I love the call, Joey. The Arizona Cardinals just held Tyler Higbee to no catches. I'm kidding. I know the comments were coming for me. He didn't play. He had COVID. I got you guys. Okay, guys.
We're buttoned up. We run a tight ship here on the check down. That's it, everybody. Go out there, win your fantasy week this week. This was week 15. Quarterback, tight end starts and sits right here on the check down. Joey Christopoulos at Joey Sports Guy, David Rispoli at Tutty Guy. See you guys later. Go win that league. Hopefully you win and come on back to the next one.
Win it.